So, every once in a while, you'll come across a piece of media, a book, a movie, or in this case, an anime, that you feel like, even if it might not be objectively a masterpiece, it hits all of the right notes for you personally to the point that you think this was tailor made for me specifically. And that's very much so the case with the dark fantasy anime series Claymore, and not least of all because it's about an order of blonde female knights that hunt demons. So already that should kind of give it a 10 out of 10. But I'll break it down a little bit more. So this had been kind of on my radar for a while. I'd heard about it. I had seen the main character. I was like, oh, this is interesting. Female knights, that's my thing. And, I'm a fan of Berserk as well. And this is very much in the same vein of an action oriented, violent, dark fantasy, but is also very, very personal. Very, very much introspection about the characters. But this takes such a very different approach to Berserk. Um, Not in the least because of the fact that the main character is a female instead of a male, and that really, really changes the dynamic. So, what I also like about it is that it's actually quite a simple premise, but it's able to. It's kind of the concept of being able to tell a complex story very simply, in the sense of it's a very simple premise of this is a generic or general dark fantasy world that is infested with demons called Yoma. And in response to this, an organization has been able to create a order of female knights that are kind of mixed breeds with the Yoma. So they're kind of half human, half Yoma, and they have incredible um, fighting abilities and also kind of magic powers. They can awaken their what is called Yoma powers in the sense of awakening their demonic side, but um, and that lets them move, super fast, become super strong. But of course, the trade off is that they are losing their humanity, and their inner demon is kind of pushing against them and trying to break out. And so, throughout the entire series, it's kind of the struggle of being able to unleash all this power whilst being able to keep it in check and remaining human. It's kind of like, I guess, if you're using the Dragon Ball Z analogy, if Goku or whoever your generic shonen protagonist, if when they went to their like superpower level, if there was a chance that they had to also fight back a demonic force inside them that could unleash and kill everybody around them, and that's kind of uh, that's the crux of Claymore. So you have your order of female knights. They are fighting demonic entities known as the Yoma, but they also have Yoma inside them. They're hybrids, and they're trying to keep that in check against their inner humanity. And it's really interesting to me. But what I like about it is it's a nice and simple premise. So our main character is Claire. Again, it's very kind of like the Sisters of Battle in Warhammer, where they kind of there's a religious aesthetic to them, even though it's not explicitly a religious order in this. They do pray, which is nice. Like religion is actually portrayed as fairly positive in the series. Um, like the main character Claire will pray for people's success and for her loved ones and all that. But in any case, we start off with our kind of male character who is kind of our anchor to normality, named Raki, who he's voiced by in the English dub. He's voiced by the same voice actor as Natsu from Fairy Tail, and basically feels like any voice he's doing that isn't Natsu, you he kind of sounds like a bit of a wimp, which kind of works in this because it helps show the kind of power difference between him and Claire, where he's very weak. His parents or his family was killed by Yoma. His older brother was impersonated by a Yoma because the Yoma can also impersonate people. They can also kind of mimic other humans, and they just kind of exude an aura around them that only the Claymores can detect. Claymores being another name for the order of these female knights. And in any case, so Claire is one of these knights, one of the Claymores. She hunts down the Yoma, kills them, but now Rocky is left all alone, and he's able to tag along with her. But what's kind of interesting is that there's a lot of kind of character development of At first, Claire is very, very standoffish, very, very reserved and emotionless. Like, you can tell that's just kind of the way the Order trains them and raises these basically child soldiers from a very young age to have, like, no emotions, be completely kept in control, which kind of makes sense in a way because I feel like their Yoma powers or their Yoma demonic side could come through um, with extreme emotion, which it does. But at the same time, they kind of act very inhuman. So she's just kind of very, I don't care about you, Rocky. You're just going to get yourself killed. She doesn't really want any reward for carrying out the contract of killing the Yoma. There's like, their handlers in the organization are just these guys dressed in black, and they just will collect, they'll just kind of collect the money from the town that requests them to help exterminate the Yoma. But in any case, that's kind of the first section of the anime of the series is her and Rocky just kind of going from place to place, her fighting Yoma. Her almost awakening is what it's called when their Yoma side almost completely takes over. So, like, in the series, all of them have silver eyes, but when their Yoma power awakens, they turn yellow and they slowly just become more beast like or demonic because, that's the demonic side trying to awaken. And in one instance, when they're trying to fight one in a church, she almost awakens to the like breaking point, and Rocky is able to hold her back, and she kind of comes back to it. But then following this, I think is one of the best arcs is kind of Claire's origin story of there will be spoilers in this, so if you really want, if you want a brief recommendation, yeah. If you like dark fantasy, if you want something that has really not hardly any actual fan service or anything like that, like despite the fact that all the main female characters are incredibly attractive, they don't really focus on that, or it's not quite as gratuitous as something like Berserk gets, which I appreciate. It's different. It doesn't need to rely on that. But yeah, I absolutely watch it. I also got the whole manga box set. I haven't quite read it yet, or I haven't read it yet because I just finished the series, the anime, which does deviate from the manga. So I'll probably give my thoughts on the manga later. But in any case, yeah, I would highly recommend it. If you're looking for something with a lot of good action, the musical score. This is an anime that came out in the mid 2000s, and it kind of still has that. Does anybody else think that in the 2000s it felt like so much anime had like this weird gray filter put over everything? But visually, it looks pretty good. It's pretty standard. It's very similar again to like the 1997 Berserk, where it's not as gonna be as good as the manga, but it's good enough to really kind of whet your appetite anyway. Similar to how like the musical choice in the series is just very bizarre, where you'll have this like dark fantasy setting, but it's playing this like triumphant classical score every once in a while. But then things get serious when the bagpipes start playing because of course Claymore is I think it's a Scottish origin great sword is the sword that they're all using, which is interesting that they don't really focus on the swords as much as the women wielding them. But in any case, to go on, we learn Claire's origin story, where um, the organization, which that's just kind of what it's called, is the organization. It's not even officially called the Claymores. Uh, Everybody is kind of ranked by how effective they are, and so like she's actually adopted by her adoptive father. Her family was also killed by Yoma, and she was basically being held captive by one of them for heaven knows how long. And she kind of reflecting kind of her relationship with Rocky. This Claymore named Teresa kind of adopts her as her kind of surrogate daughter, and she's actually the most powerful in the organization. She's number one, and some of them have like these interesting nicknames. Like her name is Teresa of the Faint Smile, in the sense that, well, she's supposed to be a completely emotionless, killing machine. She still has that little bit of humanity, and that's kind of indicated in the fact that she always kind of has a faint smile on her face. But it was like they both kind of learn to form a very strong bond. Teresa gets a bit more. She becomes more human. She kind of remembers more of her human self, and at some point she decides to leave the organization, which is of course like punishable by death. If they do that, the other sisters have to come in and kill her. But in this case, Claire's or no, Teresa is able to escape her execution, but then the organization sends the next top four Claymores after her, and the number two is named Priscilla. Again, they kind of have these almost religious sounding names, kind of like how in Warhammer you have like Saint Lucia or Saint Dominica or Saint Celestine, stuff like that. The characters in this, they're named like Claire or Teresa or Genevieve or Galatea, stuff like that. Which again, it really solidifies like the aesthetic or the whole kind of feeling of this organization. But anyways, number two in the organization, Priscilla, again is like the various each one of them tends to have a certain way that they have a certain strengths and weaknesses. Like some of them are super fast, some are super strong. Some of them can basically either dampen or have extremely good senses of like the yoki, or yoki is kind of another way of like describing their power. It can sound complicated, but it really isn't. It's they have a demonic side inside of them, and that's just kind of their power level, or where their shonen magic power level comes from. But they have to constantly keep it in check. But anyways, Priscilla basically pushes it too far and fully awakens into a demonic monster, just an awakened beast or an awakened being, and she's able to kill Teresa and kill all but one of the other claymores that were sent to stop her. And Claire is able to escape, and Priscilla has just been kind of terrorizing an area far to the north since then. And so we learn that Claire is different from the other claymores because she's actually ranked last. She's ranked number 47 in the organization, which should mean she's the weakest, but unknown to anybody but her and the higher ups in the organization, she wasn't actually just fused with a Yoma. She was fused with the severed head of Teresa. So she was fused with the number one Claymore in the organization. And what happens to her, because she almost awakened, and it happens to a few other Claymores as well, that kind of become close to her and kind of bond with her, is they basically become half awakened in the sense of they push their limits so far that they start awakening, but they don't go all the way and are able to revert back to human. And that kind of gives them extra power as well. But then the organization, out of fear, like almost starts hunting them. But then, as we go on, going towards the end of the anime, again, from what I read, the anime kind of made up its own non-canon ending because the manga goes on for like almost twice as long after this. So I'm excited to see how the manga ends, because I actually thought that the anime ending was completely satisfactory. It was a perfectly fine ending, in that her and like 20 other claymores are able to like get summoned to a town and like far to the north, because that's where the other awakened beings are going to be, so they can finally stop them. There's a huge battle, and Claire like fully awakens as well, and is able to kill Priscilla. But then one of her friends is like, you can still turn back, and she can share her kind of energy. They sync their Yoki auras together, and that's able to get Claire to come back to being a human. And her and Raki just kind of go off they all kind of leave the organization and just kind of go off to live out their own lives, which I thought was a fine ending. The issues I would have with the series is that it does kind of follow the shonen trope of the magic system basically functions in order to move the plot along or just to do cool stuff. Like there isn't quite there aren't really quite satisfactory restrictions on like what can your Yoma powers do, because they basically can just do whatever you want in order to make the plot work. So like in one instance, like oh, it makes you super fast, or well now in this case, you can sync your Yoma Yoki auras together, and it will make you turn back to human but kill the other person. It can also like regenerate them because the Claymores, and I think that's the main theme of the series is like you know being torn between humanity and kind of extreme emotions, because by the end of the series, Claire and Priscilla, when they're both fully in their Yoma forms, they're only driven by like vengeance and hatred for each other, and it's only kind of things of bonds of like love and friendship that can kind of tether them back to humanity, which Claire is able to do. Um, and it's kind of a good metaphor for it, right? Where like hate of how hatred and vengeance and just giving into the more baser emotions turn them into literal monsters. And I gotta say, like the monster designs of the Yoma don't all look the same. Some of the lower grunts just kind of look like regular monsters, but like there's some just almost strangely beautiful and just very disturbing designs. Like one of them, especially like when a Claymore awakens, is like they can like turn into like a snake woman, or in Claire's case, she like gets like deer hooves and then like two black like claw wings, whereas and it's different for each one of them, and so you kind of get some interesting body horror, almost eldritch, almost like Lovecraftian levels of things that just don't belong in like a regular human fantasy world. But so the art design on it and character design is fantastic. I suppose another issue I have, and it might just be an embarrassment of riches, but uh, it sounds like a good thing that oh, there's nothing but these tall blonde warrior women, which sounds amazing, but they can kind of look the same, and you're like, oh wait, which one is that, or who, what's her relation again? Because a lot of them kind of have similar hairstyles, but that's not a major issue. Because we know Claire's the main character, and yeah, but I really really enjoyed the series because again it kind of struck every note of something I like, in that it's a fairly simple story, but it's told so well, and it does touch on a lot of themes that aren't. It's not the same few themes over that we've seen a million times. It is more just. It's kind of like the idea in Bloodborne of, the further that you try and cling to your humanity, the worse it is when you snap. But in this case, she's able to revert back. And again, I like the fact that religion isn't portrayed as negative. The order is obviously quite nefarious, but they're not an explicitly religious order. That's actually a separate thing. The church doesn't even want Yoma in their town. Like the bishop has to, like again, something I like is that in the arc where they have to fight the Yoma in the church, it's the bishop himself who invites Claire in secret to come in and help them out. And you think like, oh, the Yoma could be hiding among any of the clergy, but thankfully it's not any of them. It doesn't turn out, oh, the bishop was an evil monster the whole time. And I kind of like Raki. He's they've kind of figured out pretty quickly what to do with him. Where he starts out as like really annoying and kind of whiny, tagging along, and not very useful. But he does eventually like learn more of how to wield the sword. He's much better emotional support, and he kind of turns into a Chad at the end because at one point like they have to, because Claire is able to like, he's smart enough to understand that Claire has to separate from him at some point because it's just too dangerous. But when they separate or when they part, she does kiss him, and so the fact that he's like this manlet and she's probably at least 6 foot tall, like half demon night girl, the fact that she's in love with him makes him kind of a Chad. But in any case, yeah, that's kind of just me rambling about Claymore and why it's awesome. I feel like the fight scenes, like in a lot of shonen anime, because this feels like half shonen, half dark fantasy, and again, it works. Um, is a lot of the fight choreography isn't really that great. It is still them just swinging swords really, really fast and hard at each other, but um, the actual weight behind it, the emotional weight of what they're doing, is still that's more important, and that's actually gives a lot of good payoff. So yeah, I would highly recommend Claymore. For me, it would be at least like a 9.5 out of 10. The manga's probably just going to be a 10 out of 10 because like again, it's able to have some very very intense and intimate character moments. I wish there was a little bit more humor at times. It does feel like you needed a little break with levity, but it is nice that you kind of see Claire gradually act more and more like a human. They also kind of give the other Claymores more of a personality, so it feels like it may have just been her, or the author and creator kind of realize, okay, we kind of have to give him personality as well. But yeah, so Claire is like best girl. She's top waifu, 10 out of 10. Anime is great. Watch it.